Whenever like we are working as a team, so we are going to store our code in a common repository. Okay, so what is meant by repository? So repository is nothing but we call it as an storage area. Okay, so where we are going to store our code. So generally the most famous repository is like GitHub repository. Okay, so we are going to store our code in the GitHub repository. So if we need to store the code in the GitHub repository, so we need to create a account in the GitHub. Okay, so in a GitHub, like you should have an account, and post that like you should have one more software called as an GitHub desktop. Okay, so one and only if the GitHub desktop is available, you can pull the code as well as you can push the code. Okay, so what is meant by pull the code? So pull is nothing but okay, whenever like you are adding new code to the repository, the short form of the repository is repo. So whenever you are planning to add a new code to the repo, so we call it as an pull operation. Push operation. Okay, and whenever you are pulling the existing code, okay, so whenever you are planning to clone the code, which is nothing but we call it as in cloning, so which is nothing but so some code is available in the repo. So if you are planning to clone the code from your repo to your local, we call it as an pull. So in case if it is of an local to repo, we call it as an push. So the local in the sense which means like our system. Okay, so now if you don't have the account in the GitHub, so like just navigate it to the official web page of the github.com, and then you can just click on the create account. Okay, so and after clicking on the create account, so you can just provide your mail id and you can fill the necessary details, and then you can start sign upping the account. You can create your own account in the GitHub desktop. Sorry, in a GitHub account. Okay, so now I have created the new account with my mail id and the password, and post that like it will be asking for the username. Always make sure the username should be unique. Okay, if I give an apple, it will say so the username is not available. So just try to give some unique username and make a note of your mail id and your password and the username. So only with the help of this we can log into the github.com. Post that it will asking some mandatory question, so fill all the mandatory question and try creating the account in the GitHub. So once the account is created, okay, so I'm planning to like sign in my account. So let me try sign in my account. Okay, now I have entered the credential and I have try signing the account. And if you notice, like the GitHub ID of my repo is like learn more training. So this is my GitHub account. Now inside my account, as a first step, I am going to add a repository. Okay, we need to create a repository. So now I am creating the repository, but in the real time already the repository will be available. Okay, and we should use that particular repository. So because that is an organization specific, so they will maintain the repository. So but here as part of the training, like I am creating my own repository. Okay, so let me just click on the new button. Okay, if I click on the new button, like it will navigate to the page called as and create a new repository. Here I'm just going to give the repo name. So let it be like LMTI 7 a.m. Okay, so June 2024. Okay, so just I'm giving the repository name. It is checking for the availability of the repository name. Yes, it's available, which means it will check inside my GitHub account, so whether there is a duplicate repo name is or there. So now it is there. Now whenever like we are creating the repository, so we need to specify whether it is a public repo or the private repo. So when it is of an public repo, so anyone on internet can see this repository, which means anyone can access. But when it is of a private repo, like only the specific set of people can access. So now I'm making the repo as an public because like I'm not giving any authentication. So now any of you can access my coding. I'm making the repo as an public. Okay, in case of an organization, for sure it will be like private. When it is of an private, only the specific set of the persons can access the code. So now I'm making the like code as an public, my repo as an public. Now pose that like there is an option called as an create repository. I'm just clicking on the button called as an create repository. Okay, so now I have created the repository. So now my repository name is like LMTI 7 a.m. like kind of an June 2024, and it is a public repo. And in the later point, we can change the repository from public to private or private to public, so that we can change it up. We can change the access control. Now inside this repository, so we don't have any code. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a base code. Okay. So every time in a repository, we will be having the base code, or technically we call it as an master code. Okay. Or in some cases, they will be called as an main code. Okay. So we are going to add the base code. So as I'm having the base code, I'm going to add this base code like into my repo. So whenever you are planning to add the any of the coding, so the first step is like we need to clear the temp files in our project. Okay, so we will be having the lot of temp files. So we need to clear the temp files in our project. So how we are going to clear? So we are going to clear with the help of the maven commands. Okay, so we are going to execute the maven commands, in which like we are going to execute the command called as an clean. So whenever we say clean, it will clear the temp files. So generally what happened, right? So whenever like we are executing any of the program, so by default the folder called as a target will be created. So the target is nothing but it is a temp file. It will have the temp data related to the execution. We need to clear this temp data. So how we are going to clear? So in the right side, right, we will be having the maven. So just click on the maven, and inside which we will be having the option called as an life cycle. If you expand the life cycle, okay, we are having the option called as an clean. Okay, this we call it as a maven command. So just select the clean and click on the run button. So what it used to do, it will clear all the temp files. Okay, so whatever the temp files which is available, so it will clear all the temp files, and we will be having the fresh and clean code. If you notice, the build is success, and it says deleting target folder, which means all the temp files will be stored only in the target folder. Now the target folder is deleted. Okay, so now we are having the clean code. I need to add this clean code into my repository. Okay, so now this is my repository. So either you can create the coding, or else you can upload the existing coding. So in our case, we are not going to create a new file because we are already having an existing framework in our system. I need to add the framework over here. So how I'm going to add? So I'm just going to click on this upload an existing file. Okay, so if I click on upload an existing file, I need to browse and add my folder. Okay, so now whenever like we create a project in our system, so it will be stored in our local workspace. So how we can navigate to the local workspace? If I place the mouse over the project name, it will show the path. Or else what you can do, you can right click, and there is an option called as an at the below open in. When you click on the open in, and if you click on the explorer, okay, it will be navigating to the path where my project is gets stored. So this is the path where my project is gets stored. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drag and drop the entire folder over here. Now if I drag and drop, it will add all the files. Okay, so it will add all the class files and the design file and the step definition file. So now everything is added. Okay, so now whenever like we are adding new file, so we should commit changes. So commit means like the technically like whenever like you are pushing the new code, so the technical word we call it as a commit. So commit means which is nothing but you are planning to add a new code. Okay, but whenever like you are adding a commit, so we should provide the commit description. So we should add some description so that like other will get to know so what is the need of the commit. So now I'm just navigating to the Chrome. Okay, here before clicking this commit changes, I'm just adding the description. Let's say like I'm adding the base code for the project. Okay, and if I click on the changes, commit changes, if I click on the commit changes, all my coding will be added inside the repository. So now the name of the repository is like LMTI 7 a.m. June 2024, and it is a public repo. And in case if you need to change this public repo to the private repo, so if you just click on the settings option and if you scroll to the down, okay, there is an option to change. So we call it as a danger zone, and here you can change the repo to private or to the public. Okay, so you can change the visibility condition so whenever you need it. Okay, now I'm just traversing back to the repo. So now inside our repo, if you notice, like the project which I have created called as a refactor May 2024 is added, and if I open the folder, okay, it will have all files. So the yes, source folder and the pom.xml, and if I click on the source, it will have the main and the test. If I click on the test, it will have all the folder structure. Okay, which means all our coding has been added into this repository. So moving forward, we are going to use this repository and in a real time. Okay, so the code is hosted in the repository. How you are going to pull the code from the repository to your local? So basically what they used to do, they used to provide the git link. Okay, so only with the help of the git link you can clone the code. So now how can I get the git link? So if I access the repository, we are having the option called as an code. If I click on the drop down, okay, so there is an URL, so which we call it as a git link. I'm just copying the git link and I'm pasting over there. Okay, this is the git link. As a first step, like we will be getting the git link, and with the help of the git link we are going to clone the code. And also if you notice here, it says okay, one commit. So what is meant by commit? Which means like someone has added the new code. So basically like just now I added the new code, and if you see the commit description will be available over here. So adding the base code for the project, and it will give the username. So my username is LearnMore Training, so it is displaying. If you are adding the new code, so your name will be displaying. So by this way, like we will get to know who has added this coding. Okay, so now I have created the base code. Now I am going to clone the code from the repo to my local. And in order to clone the code, like we need something called as an GitHub desktop. Okay, so this is the very easiest way for cloning the code from the repo to the local. So traditionally in olden days they have used the git commands, so you can avoid the git commands with the help of the GitHub desktop. And this GitHub desktop is compatible with all other IDEs, so you can use along with the Eclipse or the Visual Studio Code or the PyCharm. So whatever the IDE we are using, so it will compatible with all the IDEs. So if you haven't not installed the GitHub desktop, so just you can click on the download for Windows and you can start installing. Okay, so now in my system I have already installed. Let me just search with the keyword called as an okay, GitHub desktop. Okay, so now if I just open the GitHub desktop, you could be able to see this icon with the cat symbol. So that is the icon of the GitHub desktop. Post installation you can verify in this way. So now still the GitHub desktop is opening in my system. Let me try to reopen it. Okay, so now if you notice, like it is opening the GitHub desktop, and inside this GitHub desktop, like we are going to do the configuration, and with the help of the GitHub desktop, like we are going to like clone the coding. So if you notice, like now the GitHub desktop is opened, but in my case, like I have already pointed some other repository, so you ignore about it. So whenever you are opening the GitHub desktop for the first time, so just navigate to the file section. Okay, so just click on the file and navigate to the options. So the first step is like you need to sign in your GitHub account. So you will be having an option for an sign in. So basically we will be establishing the sync up with the repository, so only by clicking on the sign in. Okay, so just navigate to the file and the options, and inside the option like select the option called as an sign into github.com. So just click on sign into github.com and it will throw the pop-up called as an continue with browser, and click on continue with the browser. Okay, and after which like it will ask for the authentication, like enter the credentials. Okay, and after entering the credential, so it will authenticate. If you click on the sign in, it will throw some pop-up, like this is the alert it is throwing, and you need to click on the open button. So once you click on the open button, automatically like your account will be signed in. So if I re-verify, if I click on the files and if I navigate to the option, you could see my account has been signed in successfully. So you all should use your own personal GitHub account, and you should sign in with the help of your own GitHub account. So now we have done a sign in. So now next step is like we need to clone the code. So how we are going to clone the code? Obviously with the help of the git link. So I have shared the git link. So just copy the git link and navigate to the GitHub desktop and navigate to the files, and inside which we are having an option called as an clone repository. Now click on the clone repository. If I click on the clone repository, okay, so we will be having three tabs called as an github.com, GitHub Enterprise, and another is of an URL. So select the URL because we are having the git link. Okay, so this is a repository URL. So we need to paste the repository URL over here. Okay, now I have pasted my git link. So the extension of the git link will always ends with the .git. Okay, so we should paste the git link, and post that we need to specify the local path. So local path is nothing but where you want to store the clone code. Okay, so just provide the local path. So in my case, like I always try to store in the local disk D. Like in the local disk D, I have created the folder called as git clone. So where I'm planning to clone the code. Okay, or else like let me just rename, or let me just create some folder. Okay, so I'm just creating the folder called as an refactor under the git clone in my local disk D. So after specifying the path, okay, so click on clone button. If you click on the clone button, so it will start cloning the project. So where the coding will be stored? So now it will store the code in your local. Okay, so now it will take some time. Okay, so it will load everything, and after loading everything, at the top right corner you could be able to see the current repository. Okay, so what is the current repository which I have pointed? So it is pointed to LMTI 7 a.m. June 2024, and you will be having an option called as a branch. Okay, I will explain like what is meant by branch in the next session. So basically it will be pointing to the main branch. Okay, so now this is the current repository, and this is the branch which is pointed, and where this current repository is stored. If you place the mouse over the current repository, it will give me the local path. It is stored in the local disk D under the git clone. Now let me just navigate to the local disk D. Okay, let me just navigate to the folder called as an git clone. Okay, if I just navigate to this folder, where I could able to see the folder called as an refactor. So now we need to check where the refactor is present. Okay, so now if I just open, you could see our entire project is present. So now we should open this project in an IntelliJ. So how we can open? So just navigate to the IntelliJ and click on the main menu, and there is an option called as an open. Okay, so just select the main menu. So I'm not sure, my system is hanged, just a minute. Okay, so click on the main menu and then click on the open option, and pose that like you need to navigate to the path. So where the code is present. So obviously the code is present in this particular path, right? I'm copying the path, okay, and then I'm just pasting the path over there. So after pasting the path, so the common mistake everyone used to do is like, so they will be selecting the folder and they will be clicking on the OK button. But so whenever like you are opening the project, even in the real time, we should always select the pom.html file. Okay, so if we need to open the project, so we should always like open the pom.html, and if you click on the OK button, so it will ask me whether it's open as a project or not. I'm just clicking as a open as a project, and you need to click on the thrust project, and it is asking me whether I need to open in this window or the new window. So let me just open in the new window. Okay, so now it is opening in the new window. So now what happened, like whatever the coding which is present in the repository will be cloned to your system. Okay, so it will take some time, and if it is asking anything, just click on the load maven project, and all other warnings you can just ignore it up. So now if you notice, okay, it will contain, okay, all the folders. So all the folders will be available. So whatever the things which I have created, everything will be available. And if you notice at the top, it is pointing to git branch main. But whereas previously when we have locally, so it doesn't show the version because we haven't done the version control. But now we are doing the version control with the help of the git. So that is why my cloned code has the version control along with the git, okay, which is pointing to the main branch. So moving forward, like we are going to use this repository, and whatever the coding which is available in the repository, so everyone can access the same code. And if you need to execute, you can execute the same code. And if you need to add new file, so you can add a new file. But as of now, like you don't need to add any new file. So just to clone the code and just start exploring. Okay, pretty much it will be like similar way. So only one difference you guys need to do is like, so just navigate to the pom.html. So in my system, I have used the Java version 17. I have created a project with the Java version 17. If you have used other Java version, so just navigate to the pom.html. So just change this source and target to the appropriate Java version. If you're using the 21, so just update it as an 21 and 21. Another thing is like probably in an IDE, it will be pointing to the correct Java version. If not, you can click on the main menu, and then just you can click on this project structure. If you click on the project structure, okay, so basically it will show the STK. So point to the respective version. I'm just pointing to the 17, okay, because I have created the project in the 17. So we should change the STK version to the 17. Okay, so make sure you are pointing to the respective Java version and just click on the apply and OK. So automatically, so the indexing will happen to the Java version 17. But now it is indexing to the Java 22. If I reload the project, so the re-indexing will happen, and while doing the re-indexing, it will be re-indexing to the Java version 17. Okay, so now pause that like as usual, like you can access the runner file and you can run the runner file. Now moving forward, like whenever we are planning to do any code change, so all the changes will be captured in the GitHub desktop. So whatever the thing which you are going to do, all the changes will be captured in the GitHub desktop. But one more thing we need to do, so like whenever like we are creating the framework, right, so we should always add the file called as an gitignore. Okay, so we should add this file called as an gitignore. Basically in your project side they will be adding by default. So what is the need of this gitignore file? So the need of the gitignore file is like to ignore the temp files. So if you notice our local code, okay, so if I just open my local code, so in the local code, so we will be having some file called as an gitignore. So we should copy the same file and we need to place in my project as well, okay, in my repo as well. So now I'm adding the file called as an gitignore. Okay, so now whenever I add a new file, So automatically whatever the file we are adding, it will be captured in the GitHub desktop. So now this is the file which I have added. So now inside this file, what I'm going to do, okay, I'm going to like delete everything, okay, and I'm going to copy what I'm having in my notepad. So I will explain, or else like you can just straight away you can have the existing thing and you can just copy in the notepad. So what I'm going to do here is like here, like we need to ignore the temp files. So generally, right, so whenever we do an execution, the temp files will be created. So where the temp files will be created, whenever you run the code in IntelliJ, so the folder called as an .idea will be created. So even this is a temp file, but we should always ignore the temp file because we should not store the temp file in the repository. So that is the reason at the first line I have added .idea slash asterisk symbol. So if I add the asterisk symbol, it will add all the folders or all the files which is present inside the .idea folder. Okay, so then we should ignore the this XML file, and we should ignore the IML file. So basically for the IML file, so we should give the project name. So what is the project name? So like I can just copy the project name. Okay, so we should provide the project name. Okay, so basically in a real time when we are executing, so these are the different types of temp file it will be created. And there is an another temp file which will be created. So one is like, so whenever we run the code, so what happened, so whenever we run the code, okay, for example I'm running one sample code in my local. So whenever we execute any of the code, by default a folder called as a target will be added, because the target folder will capture the temp data, but we should not store the temp data in the repository, which means we should ignore the target folder as well. So how we are going to ignore the target folder? So even for ignoring the target folder, so in the gitignore file, so we should add the path. What is the file name? So we can say target slash asterisk. When I say asterisk, it will ignore all the file. Okay, so now let the execution get started. So once execution started, you could see it is creating the target folder automatically. So during each and every run, the temp files will be stored in the target folder. We should ignore the target file. Okay, basically like in a project side, so for sure they will be having the gitignore file. Okay, in case if the gitignore file is not available, so you should ignore the .idea file, and then you should ignore the target file, and then you should ignore the IML file. So while executing, so sometimes it will create some temp files called as an IML. So we need to ignore that IML file as well. So that is the reason I have added this gitignore. Now where I have added the gitignore? So the gitignore I have added in my repository, in my local repository, which is pointing to the GitHub. Now whatever the new file I'm adding, all the file will be captured in the GitHub desktop. So now this is the new thing which I have added. Right now if you notice, like this is the file I have copy pasted. Now we need to add this file in the repository so that everyone can access it up. So now I'm just adding the comment, adding dot git ignore file, and then I'm clicking on the commit to main. So when I say commit to main, we are adding to this main branch, and then you need to click on the push origin, which means you are pushing the new code to the repo. So now if I navigate to my repository and if I do the refresh, okay, so now the commit count will be changed. So now the commit count will be kind of an 2 commits, which means recently right now I added the gitignore file. So now whenever you clone the code, so you will getting the gitignore file as well. But if you have already cloned the code, so then what you need to do? So in order to sync up with the repository, like you should always click on the option called as an fetch origin. So whenever you click on the fetch origin, if there is any new code available in the repository, it will add the new code to your local. So you need to click on the fetch origin, and after clicking fetch origin, so it will show one more option called as an pull. So then if you click on the pull, so obviously like, so the coding will be added to your local, the respective new coding will be added to your local. Now let me just do the dry run, let me check whether I'm able to execute the code or not. So now I'm just navigating to the runner file. I'm right clicking on it and I'm just clicking on run feature file. So in order to ensure like everything is working as expected. Okay, so now let the project get built and post that like the scenario should execute successfully. If that is the case, then we can ensure like we have committed the code in a correct way and we are able to clone the code, we are able to build the cloned code as well as we are able to execute the cloned code, which is nothing but whatever the code which is available in the repo. So we are able to execute successfully. So now if you notice, it is initializing the test, it is picking the particular scenario and it will execute the particular scenario. Okay, which means there is no issues. Now if you notice, okay, so when after execution or during the execution, so it will automatically create the temp files. So now I told already, so whenever some new files are added, it will be automatically captured in the GitHub desktop. But now the new file called as an .idea and the target folder is added. But if I just open the GitHub desktop, okay, so still it is having the files. Okay, so still it is having the ignore files, which means like we haven't added the gitignore command properly. So let me just check what is an issue and we can rectify in the next session. Okay, so what is the purpose of gitignore file? In the sense, have in the mind, so in order to ignore the temp files, so like these are the temp files, right? So this is the temp files which we have added. So in order to ignore the temp files, so we should always add the gitignore file. And one thing, now I think it will avoid, because yes, now it has avoided, because the gitignore file should be added in the project level. But where I added, in the sense, I have added in the source file, I have added inside the source folder. That is the reason it haven't considered. Now if I, after adding this gitignore file in the correct place, if I open the GitHub desktop, it doesn't consider the it doesn't consider the temp files. So rather than, it has considered the new file which we have added. So this is the file which we have added. Whenever we add the new file, so it will use with the keyword called as a new and it will be appearing in the green color. Now in the old location, so whenever we have deleted something from the old location, which means like I have removed this gitignore file inside the source folder, right? So that is the reason it is giving the deleted symbol. Now what we need to do, we need to add this two changes inside our framework. So now I'm selecting these two changes and I am just adding the command. So adding, okay, gitignore file, and then I'm clicking on commit to main. So now what happened, like if I click on the push origin, so now we are having the proper structure. So we have placed the gitignore file in the proper place. Moving forward, whenever we are type something, it won't consider, this GitHub desktop won't consider the temp files. So I will explain the usage of the GitHub desktop and how we are going to do the coding, how we are going to do the verification, and how the automation process going to work. So those things like we can discuss in the next session.